It was supposed to be a peaceful evening. A man sat on the front porch of his own home, sipping sweet iced tea and watching the sun sink beneath the horizon after an exhausting stretch of work. Then a patrol car screeched to a stop, and an aggressive officer approached with one hand resting dangerously close to his holster. In an instant, the quiet night shattered into a tense confrontation. What the officer did not know was that the man he was about to illegally handcuff was not a trespasser. He was a federal magistrate judge. Crestwood Hills was the kind of neighborhood where centuries-old oak trees shaded perfectly maintained streets. Every lawn was trimmed with almost obsessive precision, and the evening silence was a luxury residents paid millions of dollars to enjoy. For the Honorable Marcus Whitaker, purchasing the sprawling Victorian home at 402 Willow Creek Drive was far more than a real estate transaction. It was the culmination of a distinguished career built over decades. The house represented countless nights spent studying at Georgetown Law, years working as a public defender in the legal trenches, and an exhausting but impeccable tenure as a federal prosecutor before his eventual appointment to the federal bench. Marcus was a mature man whose temples were touched with distinguished silver. Draped in black robes inside his courtroom, he embodied absolute authority. He approved FBI wiretaps, determined bail for international drug kingpins, and possessed a legal mind respected by prosecutors and defense attorneys alike. But on that quiet evening, Marcus was not acting as a judge. He was simply a homeowner. He wore faded gray sweatpants, a worn Georgetown University hoodie, and slip-on loafers. He had been moving heavy boxes of law books into his new home office and was exhausted from the effort. After pouring himself a glass of sweet iced tea, he stepped onto the magnificent wraparound mahogany porch to watch the sunset. His wife, Camille, a prominent pediatric surgeon, was inside preparing dinner. At last, Marcus felt completely at peace. That peace was interrupted by the rhythmic clicking of high heels against the sidewalk. Vivian Caldwell, who lived 3 houses away and had appointed herself president of the Crestwood Hills Homeowners Association, was walking her golden retriever. As she passed Marcus's home, she slowed. Her eyes narrowed. She did not wave or offer a friendly greeting. Instead, she stared suspiciously at Marcus, a black man in casual clothing sitting on the porch of the most expensive house on the block. Marcus noticed the look. He had seen it countless times throughout his life. He simply gave her a polite, closed-mouthed smile and raised his glass slightly in acknowledgement. Vivian did not smile back. She tightened her grip on the dog's leash, pulled out her phone, and hurried away with her head lowered, speaking urgently into the receiver. Marcus sighed and took another slow sip of tea. Here we go, he thought. He hoped he was mistaken. Perhaps she was only calling a friend. Not long afterward, the unmistakable glow of red and blue emergency lights spread across the pristine lawns of Willow Creek Drive. A Crestwood Police Department cruiser rolled to a stop directly in front of Marcus's house. Its engine idled loudly, cutting through the peaceful sound of evening crickets. The driver's door opened, and Officer Cole Mercer stepped out. Mercer was young, powerfully built, and wore his hair in a severe military-style cut. His tactical vest looked more appropriate for a war zone than a quiet suburban neighborhood. He had developed a reputation within the department as a hothead, an officer who treated every encounter as a battle for dominance. Mercer deliberately unclipped the safety strap over his service weapon before walking up the driveway. It was a subtle but unmistakable act of intimidation. Marcus remained seated on the porch swing. He did not stand or make any sudden movements. He simply watched the approaching officer with the calm, analytical gaze of a man who evaluated human behavior for a living. "Evening, Officer," Mercer said. His tone was not a greeting. It was a challenge. "Good evening, officer," Marcus replied in a deep, steady voice. "Can I help you?" Mercer stopped at the bottom of the porch steps and rested one hand casually on his duty belt. "We received a call about a suspicious individual loitering on this property. What are you doing here, buddy?" The word buddy grated against Marcus. It was a deliberate attempt to diminish him and strip away even the most basic respect. "I'm sitting on my porch and enjoying a glass of tea," Marcus answered. "Your porch?" Mercer scoffed. He looked up at the enormous Victorian house, then back at Marcus's faded hoodie and sweatpants. The disbelief on his face was unmistakable. "You live here?" "I do," Marcus said. "This house was recently sold," Mercer challenged as he stepped onto the first wooden stair. "Yes, it was. My wife and I purchased it." Marcus's voice remained even, though a trace of cold steel had entered his tone. Mercer's jaw tightened. He did not like the way Marcus looked at him. Suspects were supposed to be nervous, submissive, and eager to please. This man sat before him completely unbothered, studying Mercer as though the officer were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. I'm going to need to see some identification, Mercer demanded, climbing another step. Marcus placed his glass on the wicker side table. He leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. The legal encyclopedia inside his mind immediately retrieved the relevant case law, Terry versus Ohio and Heibel versus 6th Judicial District Court. Marcus knew his rights intimately. Officer, he said, lowering his voice into the authoritative register usually reserved for his courtroom, I am sitting on the private property of my own home. I have committed no crime, and there is no reasonable, articulable suspicion that I have committed or am about to commit one. Under the laws of this state, I am not required to provide identification. Mercer's eyes widened with surprise. That surprise was immediately replaced by anger. Oh, we've got a driveway lawyer here. He stepped higher onto the porch stairs. Listen to me very carefully. You're going to stand up, turn around, and hand me your identification, or I'm going to arrest you for trespassing and obstruction. You cannot trespass a man from his own home, Marcus replied calmly. Invoking my Fourth Amendment rights does not constitute obstruction. I strongly suggest that you contact your watch commander before making a decision you will deeply regret. It was the wrong thing to say to a man whose authority was built entirely upon ego. Officer Mercer marched up the remaining stairs and stepped onto the porch. The sanctuary had been violated. The air suddenly felt suffocatingly tight. Mercer towered over Marcus, who remained seated on the wicker swing. The officer moved his hand from his belt to his handcuffs and pulled them free. The sharp metallic rattle echoed through the silent neighborhood. Stand up now! Mercer barked loudly enough for everyone across the street to hear. Marcus noticed curtains moving in the house opposite his own. The neighbors were watching. The humiliation was intended to be public. It was a tactic Marcus understood well. Break the person's spirit, then establish complete dominance. Marcus slowly rose, making certain that both of his hands remained clearly visible and empty. He stood slightly taller than Mercer, a fact that appeared to irritate the young officer even more. Turn around and put your hands behind your back, Mercer ordered. Officer Mercer, I can read your name tag, and I want to be perfectly clear, Marcus said. His voice contained no panic. Instead, every word carried precise and lethal clarity. You are standing within the curtilage of my home without a warrant, probable cause, or my consent. If you place your hands on me, you will be violating my civil rights. Turn around! Mercer stepped forward and violently grabbed Marcus by the left shoulder. Marcus did not resist. As a black man in America, he understood the potentially lethal consequences of pulling away from an angry police officer. He allowed himself to be spun around. Mercer seized Marcus's wrists and twisted his left arm painfully high behind his back. Click! The cold steel cuff locked around Marcus's wrist and bit into his skin. Mercer dragged his other arm backward and secured the second cuff. The metal was painfully tight. Deliberately so. You're under arrest for trespassing, refusing to identify yourself, and resisting an officer, Mercer spat. Breathing heavily, he searched Marcus's sweatpants and found only a phone and a set of house keys. Mercer pulled the keys from Marcus's pocket and tossed them onto the porch swing. I didn't resist, Marcus said calmly. You will also discover that those keys open the front door of this house. Shut up! Mercer grabbed Marcus by the upper arm and shoved him toward the stairs. At that moment, the heavy oak front door swung open. Camille Whitaker stood in the doorway, wearing an apron over her blouse and holding a wooden spoon. She froze. Her eyes widened as she saw her husband, a federal magistrate judge, standing in handcuffs on the porch of their new home while an enraged police officer gripped his arm. Marcus! Camille gasped, her voice trembling. What is happening? Officer, what are you doing to my husband? Mercer pointed a stern finger toward her. Ma'am, step back inside the residence. This man is being placed under arrest. This is our home, Camille cried as she moved forward. He lives here. I'm his wife. What is wrong with you? Camille, Marcus said. His voice was like a solid rock in the middle of a raging river. It immediately captured her attention. Camille, look at me. She stopped. Tears filled her eyes as she stared at her husband. Do not argue with him, Marcus instructed clearly. Go inside, lock the door, and call Grant. Tell him I'm being taken to the local precinct. Grant Holloway was the county district attorney and one of Marcus's oldest friends. If you interfere with my investigation, I'll take you in too, Mercer threatened, puffing out his chest. Camille's fear instantly transformed into a furious, ice-cold glare. She looked Mercer up and down, recognizing exactly what kind of man stood before her. She did not say another word to him. Instead, she looked at Marcus, nodded once, stepped back into the house, and slammed the heavy oak door. The deadbolt locked with a loud decisive thud. Mercer shoved Marcus forward. "Let's go. Walk." Marcus was paraded down his own driveway. The humiliation was intense. He could feel the eyes of his new neighbors burning into him. At the end of the block, Vivian Caldwell stood beside her obedient golden retriever, watching with a look of vindicated satisfaction. Marcus kept his head high and his posture perfectly straight. He did not stumble. He did not look down. He walked with the dignity of a man who knew exactly who he was and exactly what was about to happen to the officer behind him. Mercer opened the rear door of the cruiser and roughly pushed Marcus inside. The back seat of a police car was a uniquely dehumanizing place. It was cramped, constructed from hard plastic, designed to be easily washed, and carried the faint smell of bleach, stale sweat, and fear. The door slammed shut, trapping Marcus in claustrophobic silence. Mercer climbed into the driver's seat. He glanced at Marcus through the rearview mirror, a smug smile spreading across his face. He activated the radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I have one suspect in custody, transporting him to the precinct." "Copy that, Unit 4, the dispatcher replied through the static. Mercer shifted the cruiser into gear and pulled away from the curb. The flashing lights painted the beautiful trees of Crestwood Hills in alternating shades of red and blue. "You should have just shown me your identification," Mercer said over his shoulder, shaking his head. "You could have saved yourself a lot of trouble, but people like you always have to make things difficult." Marcus sat silently in the rear seat as the tight handcuffs caused pain to spread through his shoulders. He stared at the back of Mercer's head without saying a word. He was finished offering warnings. During the drive, Mercer used the opportunity to lecture the silent man behind him. He felt invincible, completely certain of his power and authority. Keeping one hand on the steering wheel, he spoke with casual condescension. "The problem with people like you is that you think you know the law. You read an article online or watch a video, and suddenly you think you can stand on a porch in a neighborhood like Crestwood and dictate terms to a police officer. People pay a lot of money in property taxes to keep places like this safe from prowlers." Marcus remained completely silent. Inside his mind, however, he was already drafting the civil rights lawsuit. He cataloged every precise moment in which Mercer had violated the law and departmental policy: failure to de-escalate, unlawful detention, false arrest, battery, and deprivation of constitutional rights under color of law. "Giving me the silent treatment now?" Mercer chuckled. "That's fine. We'll get your fingerprints at the station. Then we'll find out who you really are. You probably have a warrant in another state. That's why you refuse to show identification." The cruiser eventually entered the gated parking lot of the 4th Precinct. The building was a harsh concrete structure, a brutal contrast to the leafy suburb they had left behind. Mercer parked, climbed out, and opened the rear door. He seized Marcus by the arm and dragged him from the vehicle. "Walk," he commanded. Marcus was led through the heavy metal doors and into the booking area. Harsh fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The room smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. Officers moved around the space, typing at computers or talking near the holding cells. Behind the elevated booking desk sat Sergeant Arthur Bellamy. Bellamy was a seasoned veteran of the force, a meticulous gray-haired man who understood the penal code inside and out. More importantly, he knew every influential figure in the county's legal system. Bellamy had survived his long career by avoiding serious mistakes. "Hey, Sarge," Mercer called cheerfully as he pushed Marcus toward the booking counter. "I've got a live one for you. Refusal to identify, trespassing, and resisting. I caught him lurking on a porch in Crestwood." Sergeant Bellamy was typing an incident report and did not immediately look up. "Put him against the wall, Mercer. Empty his pockets." "Already done. He had nothing on him," Mercer said as he forced Marcus to face the concrete wall. "All right, let's get a name." Bellamy sighed and finally looked away from his monitor. He adjusted his glasses and studied the man in the faded Georgetown hoodie, standing with his hands cuffed behind his back. Marcus slowly turned his head and looked directly at the sergeant. Bellamy froze. One hand hovered above the keyboard. The color drained from his face so quickly that he looked as if he had seen a ghost. He blinked, removed his glasses, hurriedly wiped them against his shirt, and put them back on. The face remained the same. "Mercer," Bellamy whispered, his voice suddenly tight. "Yeah, Sarge," Mercer replied, obliviously reaching for a booking form. "Mercer, what did you do?" Bellamy's voice trembled as he rose from his chair. His eyes were wide with a mixture of absolute horror and impending disaster. Mercer looked confused. "What do you mean? I just told you I caught him trespassing. He started giving me a bunch of nonsense about the 4th Amendment, so I put him in cuffs." "Take those cuffs off him," Bellamy ordered. His voice suddenly thundered across the booking area, silencing every conversation in the room. "Sarge, he hasn't been processed yet." "I said take the damn cuffs off him, Mercer, right now." Bellamy's face turned dark with rage. Mercer physically recoiled. He had never seen the sergeant lose control like this. Confused and suddenly nervous, Mercer fumbled for the handcuff key. He stepped behind Marcus and unlocked one cuff, then the other. Marcus slowly brought his arms forward and rubbed his raw, reddened wrists. He turned to face the room. Complete silence had fallen across the booking area. Every officer had stopped what they were doing. The commotion attracted the attention of the shift commander. The rear office door opened, and Captain Nolan Barrett stepped into the room holding a mug of coffee. "What is all the shouting?" Barrett demanded. "Bellamy, what's going—" The captain stopped in the middle of his sentence. His eyes locked onto Marcus Whitaker. The coffee mug tilted in his hand, spilling hot liquid onto the floor. Barrett did not even notice. "Good evening, Captain Barrett," Marcus said. His voice was calm and conversational, yet it carried the crushing weight of his judicial office. "Judge Whitaker," Barrett breathed. He quickly placed the mug down and hurried around the booking desk. "Your Honor, my God, what is going on here?" At the words Judge Whitaker, Officer Mercer felt as though his stomach had fallen from his body. The arrogance, swagger, and smug satisfaction vanished from his face. In their place came cold, paralyzing terror. He stared at the man in the sweatpants. "Your Honor." "Captain," Marcus said as he straightened his hoodie, "your officer received a report concerning a suspicious person at 402 Willow Creek Drive, my property. I informed him that I own the home. I also informed him of my Fourth Amendment rights. He chose to disregard the Constitution, enter the protected area surrounding my home, physically assault me, and arrest me for sitting on my own front porch." Captain Barrett slowly turned toward Officer Mercer. If a look could incinerate someone, Mercer would have been reduced to ashes on the linoleum floor. "Mercer," Barrett said, his voice trembling with barely contained fury, "tell me you did not do this." Mercer opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. He looked at Marcus, then at the captain, then at the empty handcuffs hanging from his hand. "I thought he didn't have identification," Mercer stammered as his tough exterior collapsed into frightened desperation. "I did not need to provide identification, Officer Mercer," Marcus said softly, taking a step closer. "As you're about to learn, ignorance of the law is not an excuse, especially for those who have sworn to enforce it." The precinct door suddenly burst open. Grant Holloway, the county district attorney, strode into the room in a tailored navy suit, flanked by two of his most experienced investigators. Camille had made the call. The storm had officially arrived. Grant was not a man who entered any room quietly. Standing tall and commanding, he possessed an aura of unquestionable authority. The metal doors trembled on their hinges after he marched through them. The silence in the booking area, already suffocating after Captain Barrett's realization, deepened into a vacuum. Grant's eyes swept across the room. He ignored Sergeant Bellamy's terrified expression and Captain Barrett's pale face. His gaze locked immediately onto Marcus. He saw the faded Georgetown hoodie, the sweatpants, and the angry red marks circling his oldest friend's wrists. A muscle tightened in Grant's jaw. The district attorney slowly turned toward Officer Cole Mercer, who still held the handcuffs and looked like a man standing over an open trap door. "Marcus," Grant said in a low, dangerous voice that carried throughout the room, "are you injured?" "I'm physically fine, Grant," Marcus replied, rubbing his wrist, "although my Fourth Amendment rights have taken a severe beating." Grant nodded once before facing Captain Barrett. "Nolan, would you care to explain why the Honorable Marcus Whitaker, a federal magistrate judge for the United States District Court, had to contact me through his wife to report that he was being transported in one of your cruisers?" A bead of sweat rolled down Barrett's forehead. "Grant, Mr. Holloway, there has been a catastrophic misunderstanding." Officer Mercer responded to a suspicious person report. He did not realize who he was dealing with. "A misunderstanding?" Grant repeated as he stepped closer. "A misunderstanding is writing down the wrong license plate number, Nolan, putting a federal judge in handcuffs while he is standing on his own property without probable cause, without a warrant, and without enough common sense to de-escalate a peaceful encounter is not a misunderstanding." Grant's voice became colder with every word. "It is false arrest. It is battery. It is deprivation of civil rights under color of law. It is a federal crime." Mercer's knees visibly weakened. He grabbed the edge of the booking desk to steady himself. "He refused to identify himself," Mercer stammered desperately. "He was uncooperative. The Homeowners Association president called it in. I was only doing my job." "Your job," Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting through the room like a surgical blade, "is to enforce the law, not your ego." He looked directly at Mercer. Section 12-4 of the State Penal Code requires an individual to identify himself only when an officer reasonably suspects that the person is committing, or is about to commit a crime. Sitting on a porch swing and drinking sweet tea does not meet the threshold for reasonable, articulable suspicion. Marcus's expression hardened. You did not like the fact that a black man in a hoodie understood the law better than you did, so you decided to punish me for it. No, sir, I swear, Mercer pleaded, searching the room for an ally. Every officer suddenly found something fascinating on the floor. Secure his body camera, Grant ordered one of his investigators, pointing sharply at Mercer. I want the dashboard footage from Unit 4, and I want the dispatch recordings preserved. No one touches the data server except my technical team. Captain Barrett swallowed hard. Grant, let internal affairs handle this. We have protocols. Your protocols are suspended, Grant fired back, stepping into the captain's personal space. This is not a routine excessive force complaint. Your officer assaulted a sitting federal judge. The Department of Justice will soon be examining every corner of this department. Grant pointed toward Mercer. Take his badge and his weapon, now. The precinct seemed to lose all its air. It became the ultimate walk of shame. Captain Barrett faced Mercer, his panic hardening into severe disappointment. Mercer, surrender your weapon, badge, and credentials, he ordered flatly. Mercer's hands shook violently as he removed his service pistol. He ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, and placed the weapon on the booking desk. He unpinned the silver badge from his tactical vest and laid it beside the gun, followed by his identification card. His career and the power he had enjoyed abusing was disintegrating before his eyes. You are suspended without pay, effective immediately, pending a complete criminal and internal investigation, Barrett said. Go to my office, do not speak to anyone, and do not touch your phone. I'm contacting the union representative, Wade Donnelly, to sit with you. You are going to need him. Mercer said nothing. He looked at Marcus one final time, perhaps hoping to see some hint of judicial mercy. Marcus's face remained an unreadable mask of stoic authority. Mercer turned and shuffled down the hallway, looking like the hollow shell of the aggressive officer who had swaggered onto Marcus's porch. Grant turned back toward his friend, and his rigid posture softened slightly. Let's get you home. Camille is beside herself. I have a vehicle waiting outside. Thank you, Grant, Marcus said quietly. He then looked toward Sergeant Bellamy, who remained frozen behind the computer. Sergeant, I trust that my name has not been entered into the booking system. No, Your Honor, absolutely not, Bellamy replied quickly, keeping his hands far from the keyboard. Nothing was entered. Good. Marcus adjusted his hoodie, squared his shoulders, and walked out of the precinct beside the district attorney, leaving a shaken police department behind them. The ride back to Crestwood Hills was quiet. Grant offered to arrange for the precinct commander to deliver a personal apology, but Marcus refused. He did not want an apology. He wanted systemic change. When the black SUV pulled into the driveway at 402 Willow Creek Drive, Camille was already running down the front steps. She wrapped both arms around Marcus and buried her face against his chest as her composure finally collapsed. Marcus held her tightly and kissed the top of her head. I'm all right, he whispered, rubbing her back. I'm here. It's over. I thought that when he put his hands on you, Camille sobbed. Her voice trembled with the unique terror of watching an armed representative of the state take away the person she loved. I know, Marcus said gently, but he chose the wrong man on the wrong porch. After the incident, sunlight once again spread across the manicured lawns and ancient oak trees of Crestwood Hills. Yet the atmosphere of the neighborhood had changed forever. Marcus sat at his kitchen island with a cup of dark roast coffee. He wore a crisp white dress shirt and slacks as he prepared for a virtual docket hearing. The doorbell rang. Camille answered it. When she opened the heavy oak door, Vivian Caldwell stood nervously on the welcome mat. She carried a plate of freshly baked blueberry muffins wrapped in cellophane. Her golden retriever was tied near the end of the driveway. Vivian's usual arrogant confidence had disappeared, replaced by fragile, restless anxiety. News traveled quickly through wealthy neighborhoods. The police union representative, attempting to control the damage, had disclosed the identity of the arrested homeowner to a prominent community board member. Before long, the entire Crestwood Hills Homeowners Association knew that Vivian had called the police on a federal magistrate judge. Camille, hello, Vivian said in an unnaturally bright, shrill voice. I wanted to welcome both of you to the neighborhood. I brought muffins. Camille stared at her. She did not open the screen door. She did not smile. Vivian, you called the police on my husband. Vivian's face turned a deep, blotchy red. Oh, Camille, it was a terrible misunderstanding. The house had been empty and packages had been stolen in nearby neighborhoods. I saw a man I didn't recognize wearing sweatpants, so I asked the police to perform a wellness check, a quick patrol. I had no idea he was a judge. Had I known he was the Honorable Marcus Whitaker, I never would have. Stop! The deep command came from the hallway. Marcus stepped behind his wife, and his presence immediately dominated the doorway. He looked at the muffins, then at Vivian's frightened face. Mrs. Caldwell, Marcus said with terrifying calm, let me stop you before you make this worse. Your Honor, I am deeply sorry. You are sorry because you discovered what I do for a living, Marcus interrupted, his voice even but lined with steel. You are sorry because you realize that the man you racially profile possesses the power to hold you accountable. He held her gaze. But let me make something absolutely clear. It would not matter if I were a federal judge, a public school teacher, a mechanic, or a janitor. My humanity and my right to sit peacefully on my own property does not depend upon my resume. Vivian opened and closed her mouth without producing a response. The cellophane surrounding the muffins crackled loudly in her shaking hands. You did not call for a wellness check, Marcus continued. You weaponized the police against a black man because my presence in your affluent neighborhood made you uncomfortable. You used armed law enforcement as a personal customer service department to manage your own prejudice. His expression grew colder. In doing so, you placed my life in danger. I never meant for the officer to arrest you, Vivian whispered, as tears of profound embarrassment spilled down her cheeks. Intent does not erase impact, Marcus said firmly. You may keep your muffins, Mrs. Caldwell. I also strongly suggest that you hire an excellent civil defense attorney. My legal team will be auditing the Crestwood Police Department and subpoenaing its emergency dispatch records. Marcus continued without raising his voice. If we discover a pattern of you misusing emergency services to harass minorities in this neighborhood, I will personally ensure that you face a lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress and violations of civil rights. Marcus reached past Camille and gently but firmly closed the solid oak door in Vivian's face. The satisfying click of the deadbolt echoed throughout the foyer. Before long, the legal avalanche began. Marcus did not retain an ordinary attorney. He hired Adrian Cross, one of the most ruthless and brilliant civil rights litigators on the East Coast. Adrian was known for dismantling police union attorneys and securing enormous municipal settlements. Their strategy extended far beyond a single lawsuit. It became a crusade. Marcus and Adrian filed a massive Section 1983 civil rights action in federal court against Officer Cole Mercer, Captain Nolan Barrett, and the city of Crestwood. They did not stop there. Adrian sent a heavily documented dossier directly to Everett Sloan, the lead investigator for the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. The local media soon learned about the incident. A whistleblower inside the precinct leaked the computer-aided dispatch report and a summary of the body camera footage to the Crestwood Chronicle. The headline struck the internet like an explosion. Local police handcuff black federal judge on his own porch. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic for the city. News vehicles surrounded the 4th Precinct, their raised satellite dishes resembling flags of war. Chief of Police Dean Calloway, who had been attending a law enforcement conference in Florida, was forced to return immediately. His phone filled with calls from the mayor, the city council, and the governor's office. Chief Calloway held an emergency press conference on the steps of City Hall. He sweated heavily beneath the camera lights as he read from a hastily prepared statement, his eyes moving nervously across the wall of microphones. The Crestwood Police Department is committed to serving every member of our community with dignity and respect. The incident involving the Honorable Judge Whitaker is deeply regrettable. Officer Cole Mercer has been suspended pending a full investigation. We are contacting Judge Whitaker to offer our deepest apologies and to resolve this matter privately. From the back of the crowd, Adrian Cross stepped toward a microphone. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Chief Calloway, Adrian said, cutting through the noise of the reporters, my client, Judge Whitaker, does not accept your apology, nor will he accept a private settlement funded by taxpayers while your department continues operating without accountability. The crowd grew quiet. We have formally requested that the Department of Justice impose a consent decree upon the Crestwood Police Department and investigate systemic racial profiling, unlawful detention, and a culture of aggressive policing. The press erupted. Chief Calloway looked physically ill. This was no longer a simple excessive force complaint that could be hidden beneath a quick settlement. It had become a federal siege. The judge on the porch had brought the full weight of the United States justice system down upon the department. The Department of Justice rarely moved quickly, but once it gained momentum, it became a juggernaut capable of crushing everything in its path. Federal investigators descended upon the Crestwood Police Department. Leading the investigation was Everett Sloan, a veteran attorney with the DOJ Civil Rights Division. Sloan was known for his icy demeanor and ruthless ability to dismantle corrupt municipal institutions. He took control of a conference room inside the 4th Precinct. He did not request permission. He simply informed Chief Calloway that the room now belonged to the federal government. The atmosphere within the precinct became intensely paranoid. Officers whispered inside locker rooms as suddenly conscious of their past arrests and incident reports. The blue wall of silence, the unwritten rule that officers protected one another at any cost, began to collapse beneath the weight of federal scrutiny. Wade Donnelly, the aggressive, red-faced president of the police union, immediately went on the defensive. He hired expensive public relations firms to reshape the story. They attempted to portray Officer Cole Mercer as an overworked and decorated public servant who had made a split-second error while protecting an affluent community from rising property crime. Donnelly even appeared on local television claiming that the media was crucifying a hero over a minor procedural mistake. But the public relations campaign was merely a desperate facade hiding a far darker reality, one that District Attorney Grant Holloway was about to expose. As the investigation deepened, a discovery emerged that threatened to shake the entire state legal system. Grant sat in his secured office with the blinds tightly closed. Beside him was his lead technical investigator, a brilliant data analyst named Tessa Vance. "Grant, you need to see this," Tessa said, turning her laptop toward him. "When we secured the precinct servers after Marcus's arrest, I did not limit the extraction to Mercer's body camera recording. I cloned the entire internal database because I suspected someone might attempt to destroy evidence." "Did they?" Grant asked, leaning closer. "Someone recently used Captain Barrett's administrative credentials to erase the internal affairs subfolder," Tessa confirmed as she opened a digital access log. "They deleted years of use of force complaints and claimed the loss resulted from routine server maintenance." Grant's jaw tightened. Obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, they're terrified. He stared at the computer. "What was inside the folder?" Tessa pressed a key and opened a decrypted cache recovered from the cloned drive. "I restored the deleted files. Mercer did not simply make a split-second mistake with Judge Whitaker. During his recent service, 7 excessive force complaints were filed against him, everyone involved an unarmed black man." She opened additional documents. 2 victims were hospitalized with broken orbital bones and fractured ribs. In every case, Captain Barrett approved the internal review, declared Mercer's actions justified under departmental policy, and buried the records so they would never reach the district attorney's office. Grant stared at the screen as cold fury settled in his chest. This was not one bad officer. It was an entire orchard infected with rot, maintained by a captain who had deliberately protected a violent predator carrying a badge. "Print every page," Grant ordered in a dangerously low voice. "Put everything into a binder. Then contact Everett Sloan at the Department of Justice. Tell him we found the evidence for a RICO conspiracy." While the criminal investigation expanded into a federal nightmare, Adrian Cross executed a flawless civil strategy against Vivian Caldwell. He subpoenaed the emergency dispatch recording from the night of the incident. When the encrypted audio file arrived at his law firm, Adrian immediately asked Marcus and Camille to listen to it with him. Inside the polished mahogany conference room, Marcus folded his hands on the table as Adrian pressed the play button. Vivian Caldwell's frantic, breathless voice filled the room. "Crestwood Emergency Services, what is your emergency?" "Yes, I need police at 402 Willow Creek Drive immediately. There's a man trespassing on the porch. He doesn't belong there." "Can you describe the individual, ma'am?" "He is a large African-American man. He is wearing a hood and trying to conceal his face. He is looking through the windows and casing the property. You need to send someone before he breaks in." "Are you certain he is casing the house? Is he armed?" Vivian hesitated briefly. "Yes, I think he has a weapon. I saw something metallic shining in his hand. Please, hurry." Adrian paused the recording. The conference room fell completely silent. Camille covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. The supposed metallic weapon had been nothing more than the light reflecting from the condensation on Marcus's glass of sweet iced tea. She lied, Camille whispered, her voice shaking with anger. She didn't simply call the police. She intentionally made you sound like an armed threat. Camille looked at her husband. She swatted you, Marcus. She could have gotten you killed. Marcus's face became an unreadable mask of controlled fury. The legal implications were unmistakable. Swatting, the act of making a false emergency report to provoke a heavily armed police response, was a felony. Vivian had not merely made a mistake caused by unconscious bias. She had committed a deliberate and malicious crime to ensure that officers arrived prepared for violence. Adrian, Marcus said, his voice carrying the uncompromising authority of a federal magistrate, amend the civil complaint, add a claim for intentional infliction of severe emotional distress, and forward this recording to Grant Holloway. His eyes remained fixed on the silent laptop. I want her charged with filing a false police report. With pleasure, Your Honor, Adrian said, a predatory gleam appearing in his eyes. The walls were closing in around everyone who had believed they could trample upon a man's dignity without consequences. Soon afterward, the Crestwood Police Department imploded. Based on the evidence recovered by Grant's technical team, the FBI launched a raid on the 4th Precinct. Federal agents in tactical gear marched through the entrance, past the stunned desk officers, and entered Captain Nolan Barrett's office. Barrett was placed in handcuffs and escorted from his own precinct in full view of local news cameras. He was charged with evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to deprive citizens of their civil rights. Vivian Caldwell was later arrested at her country club. The image of the Homeowners Association president being led away in handcuffs while stunned socialites watched became the front-page photograph in newspapers across the county. When the trial of Cole Mercer finally began, the United States District Court for the Northern District had become a fortress of security and media activity. The case had become a national symbol, a referendum on police accountability and the deadly consequences of racial profiling. The courtroom was filled to capacity. A heavy, suffocating silence hung in the air like the stillness before a violent storm. At the prosecution table sat Everett Sloan, sharp, focused, and utterly merciless. At the defense table sat Cole Mercer. He was almost unrecognizable from the swaggering, heavily armed officer who had strutted onto Marcus's porch. Mercer had lost 20 pounds. His face was pale, his suit hung loosely from his body, and his hollow, terrified eyes remained fixed on the table. The police union had abandoned him when the federal indictments were announced, recognizing that he had become too toxic to defend. Presiding over the case was the Honorable Lionel Harcourt, a senior federal judge known for his brilliant legal mind and complete intolerance for courtroom theatrics. The trial was brutal. Everett methodically destroyed Mercer's defense. He played the unedited body camera recording secured by Grant Holloway. It showed Marcus sitting peacefully, calmly explaining his rights, while Mercer escalated the encounter into physical violence simply because his authority had been legally challenged. Then came the witnesses. Everett called the other victims of Mercer's brutality, the men whose files Captain Barrett had buried. Their testimony painted a devastating portrait of a serial abuser who used his badge as permission to terrorize minorities. The most powerful moment arrived when Marcus Whitaker took the witness stand. Wearing a tailored charcoal suit, Marcus swore the oath and sat inside the witness box. He did not look at Mercer with hatred. He looked at him with profound, analytical pity. Judge Whitaker, Everett began gently, would you describe for the jury how this incident affected your life? Marcus turned toward the jurors. My entire life has been dedicated to the law, he said. His deep, resonant voice carried clearly through the silent courtroom. I have sentenced people to federal prison for violating the laws of this nation. I have signed warrants, and I have sworn to uphold the Constitution. I believed, perhaps naively, that my lifetime of service, my education, and my obedience to the law provided me with a shield. Marcus paused and briefly looked toward Camille, who sat in the front row holding Grant's hand for support. But none of that mattered, Marcus continued. When Officer Mercer looked at me, he did not see a judge, a homeowner, or a citizen protected by the Constitution. He turned his gaze toward the defendant. He saw a caricature created by his own prejudice. He stripped away my dignity, violated my physical autonomy, and paraded me before my neighbors in steel chains simply because I had the audacity to exist on my own property. Mercer flinched. He could not meet Marcus's eyes and stared down at his own hands. The physical pain caused by the handcuffs eventually faded, Marcus said, his voice building into a powerful crescendo. But the psychological terror, the realization that an armed representative of the state can simply decide that your rights do not exist, and that a neighbor can weaponize that representative with a single phone call, leaves a scar that does not heal. That does not. He looked directly at the jury. If this can happen to a federal magistrate sitting peacefully on his porch, then it can happen to anyone. If we do not hold people who abuse their power to the highest possible standard of accountability, then the law is not a shield. Marcus paused. It is merely a suggestion. When he finished, tears filled the eyes of people throughout the gallery. Even the court reporter had to pause and wipe her face. The defense's cross-examination was mercifully brief. Mercer's attorneys understood that attacking Marcus would only intensify the jury's anger. After deliberating, the jurors returned to the courtroom. As the foreperson rose to announce the decision, everyone held their breath. On the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, we find the defendant, Cole Mercer, guilty. On the charge of false arrest, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of battery, guilty. Mercer collapsed into his chair. He buried his face in his hands as his shoulders shook with silent, uncontrollable sobs. Judge Harcourt showed no mercy. At sentencing, he ordered Mercer to serve 84 months, 7 years, in a federal prison outside the state for his own protection. Captain Nolan Barrett, facing a separate federal trial, accepted a plea agreement that sent him to prison for 4 years. The civil consequences were equally devastating. Vivian Caldwell, facing felony charges for the false emergency report, settled Marcus's civil lawsuit for an undisclosed multi-million-dollar amount. She placed her Crestwood Hills home on the market and moved out of state, her reputation completely destroyed. Marcus and Camille used every dollar of the settlement to establish the Willow Creek Foundation, a scholarship program created to help underprivileged minority students attend law school. The city of Crestwood was forced to sign a sweeping federal consent decree. Its police department was dismantled and rebuilt under the supervision of an independent federal monitor. Policies were rewritten, officers were dismissed. Rigorous de-escalation and bias training became mandatory standards throughout the department. Eventually, warm golden light once again spread across the majestic oak trees of Willow Creek Drive. The neighborhood was peaceful. The air carried only the soft chirping of crickets and the distant hum of a lawnmower. Marcus Whitaker sat on his magnificent wraparound mahogany porch. He wore faded gray sweatpants, his old Georgetown University hoodie, and slip-on loafers. A glass of sweet iced tea rested in his hand, beads of condensation slowly running down its surface. The front door opened, and Camille stepped outside carrying a small plate of shortbread cookies. She placed them on the wicker table and sat beside her husband on the porch swing. A young white couple who had purchased Vivian Caldwell's former home approached along the sidewalk with their golden retriever. They did not quicken their pace. They did not clutch their phones. Instead, they stopped, smiled warmly, and waved. "Good evening, Judge Whitaker," the young man called cheerfully. "It's a beautiful night to sit on the porch." Marcus gave them a warm, genuine smile and raised his glass in acknowledgement. "Good evening. Enjoy your walk." The couple waved again and continued along the street, their laughter drifting into the twilight. Marcus leaned back against the wicker swing and felt the gentle evening breeze brush against his face. He took a slow sip of tea. The scars from that terrible encounter would always remain, a quiet reminder of how fragile justice could be. But as Marcus looked across his manicured lawn and felt the solid, undeniable presence of his home beneath his feet, he knew that the battle had been worth fighting. His sanctuary had been violated, but it had been rebuilt, stronger, safer, and unquestionably his. Marcus rested his hand over Camille's as they watched the sun disappear beneath the horizon. At last, he was truly at peace. If this story of justice, resilience, and accountability kept you on the edge of your seat, press the like button to show your support. The struggle against systemic injustice and the abuse of authority continues, and sharing stories like Judge Whitaker's helps bring the truth into the light. Subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you never miss our gripping, real-life inspired dramas. Leave a comment and tell us how you would have handled the confrontation on the porch. Share this video, spread the message, and stay tuned for more.